Evolutionists will tell you that there is an abundance of fossil evidence which basically proves the fact that evolution occurred through natural selection and genetic mutations. You may have even seen some of these evolutionists wear t-shirts which say, "We have the fossils, we win." You may even own one. But is this claim true? Do evolutionists have the fossil record which unequivocally proves evolution? Absolutely not. And in this video, we're going to see exactly why the fossil record is actually in favor of creationists, not evolutionists. Before we delve into the bedrock of the fossil evidence, let's look at a quote by the late Stephen J Gould, who was a paleontologist and evolutionary biologist. And he says something about the philosophy behind interpreting the fossil record. In the article Punctuated Equilibrium in 2007, he writes, "The general preference that so many of us hold for gradualism is a metaphysical stance embedded in the modern history of Western cultures. It is not a high-order empirical observation induced from the objective study of nature. Phyletic gradualism was an a priori assertion from the start. It was never seen in the rocks. It expressed the cultural and political biases of 19th century liberalism." I want you to keep that honest statement by Stephen J Gould in mind as we go through this topic. He says it was an a priori position. In other words, it's not based on any evidence. It's a philosophical commitment which overrides anything. So keep that in mind as we look at the supposed evidence of the fossil record and debunk it. The fossil record, a window into the distant past, gives us information about what types of organisms lived a long time ago. For decades now, paleontologists have meticulously unearthed fossils, piecing together the complex past of previous life forms. Yet, beneath the surface lies a complexity that questions the very essence of evolution. While the fossil record highlights invaluable history of ancient life forms, it does not actually support the idea of evolution based on what the fossil records actually show. Probably the biggest challenge to evolutionary theory is the abrupt and wide number of life forms that appear seemingly fully developed. As we look at this chart here, we can see this is the phenomenon known as the Cambrian explosion. This is a striking example of the sudden appearance of diverse, complex organisms supposedly around 541 million years ago. From trilobites to brachiopods, the fossil record reveals a burst of biodiversity with seemingly no evolutionary precursors. According to ucmp.berkeley.edu, a few mineralized animal fossils, including sponge spicules and probable worm tubes, are known from the Ediacaran period immediately preceding the Cambrian. In other words, the fossil record and complexity and range of fossils we have before the Cambrian explosion is very, very limited and rather simplistic. It was during the Cambrian explosion or Cambrian period when all these amazing and vast array of life forms just kind of suddenly appeared in an evolutionary blink of an eye. The website goes on to say, trace fossils made by animals also show increased diversity in Cambrian rocks, showing that the animals of the Cambrian were developing new ecological niches and strategies, such as active hunting, burrowing deeply into sediment, and making complex branching burrows. On a philosophical note, if evolution as a blind impersonal force with no mind behind it, how can it account for such a vast array of complexity? Why would a non-mind, impersonal force result in such staggering complexity we find in even the simplest cell? Surely it's more plausible to posit that a mind is behind such amazing diversity and complexity. What people don't know is that when Charles Darwin published his book, Origin of the Species, he sent a copy to the renowned paleontologist and geologist from Harvard, Louis Agassiz. After reading his book, he informed Darwin that, I'm sorry, but the geological record, in other words, the fossil evidence, does not support your theory. What your theory says that time and chance and natural selection and genetic mutations resulted in all the different life forms over millions and billions of years. But he said that that's just not what the fossil record shows. It shows that there are numerous types of fully formed species and kinds pretty much all at once within a relatively short period of time, which kind of blows the idea of slow and gradual evolution out of the water. And remember what Stephen J Gould said about phyletic naturalism, which is the slow and gradual evolution. It was an a priori commitment by the elites of that time. In reply to what the Harvard paleontologist and geologist said, Darwin wrote, "If numerous species belonging to the same genera or families have really started into life all at once, the fact would be fatal to the theory of descent with slow modification through natural selection." And guess what? 150 years or so after Darwin wrote that book, the fossil record has not changed. We haven't found all these millions or hundreds of thousands of missing or transitionary links. In fact, the fossil record has remained pretty much the same. If Darwin were alive today, I'm pretty sure he would jettison his ridiculous theory. To further create cracks in the theory of evolution, I want to look at a National Geographic article called "Was Darwin Wrong?" published in 2004. And it says, "Illuminating but spotty. The fossil record is like a film of evolution from which 999 out of 1,000 frames have been lost." That's interesting. 999 frames out of 1,000 frames of a film have been lost. In other words, 99.9% of all the so-called evidence for evolution in the fossil record doesn't exist. Imagine trying to watch a film with only 1% or even just 0.1% of the film. Do you think you'd get any kind of accurate understanding of the film? Absolutely not. And it's exactly the same with the theory of evolution through natural selection and genetic mutations over time. The fossil record, and just common sense, does not support it. The idea of evolution seems to be religiously pushed in education systems and academia as an anti-God theory. The eminent late Stephen J Gould also wrote in The Richness of Life, The Essential Stephen J Gould on page 263, "The extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. The evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of their branches. In any local area, a species does not arise gradually by the gradual transformation of its ancestors. It appears all at once and fully formed." Did you catch that? Now, Stephen J Gould was not a creationist. He was an atheist. He was committed to naturalism. But he is honest, and he admits that, look, there's no evidence in the fossil record for this whatsoever. There's nothing. All these supposed evolutionary trees we find in textbooks, there's nothing to it in the geological record. It is a theory pushed not based on evidence and not based on common sense. Sometime later, Richard Dawkins, the evolutionary biologist, responded to this quote by saying, "We don't need fossils. The case for evolution is watertight without them. So it is paradoxical to use gaps in the fossil record. They were evidence against evolution." Unfortunately for Dawkins and his delusionary world, evidence is important. We don't have their fossil evidence. So why would people still believe it? And in previous videos, I've also pointed out that Dawkins and other atheists are committed to naturalism. Just what Stephen J Gould said. There's a commitment, an a priori commitment to philosophical naturalism, not based on any kind of evidence or real-life data we can interpret. Even Charles Darwin himself said in The Origin of Species on page 280, "Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? This, perhaps, is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory." Why not indeed? Because it doesn't exist. So, as we come to a close, let's look at Colossians 2, verses 3 to 4 and verse 8. "In him," Jesus, "lie hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. I'm telling you this so no one will deceive you with well-crafted arguments. Don't let anyone capture you with empty philosophies and high-sounding nonsense that come from human thinking and from the spiritual powers of this world rather than from Christ." So, to recap, Stephen J Gould admitted that the idea of this slow, gradual change is not based on any evidence in the fossil record. It's not even based on the complexity and diversity in the even simple cells. It is a philosophical presupposition. Secondly, that all this amazing array of life and complexity of life that appears suddenly, we have the evidence on the side of creationists, not on the side of this long, phyletic gradualism. The fossil evidence supports creationism, not evolutionary theory. So, which is more plausible? Based on the evidence that we have that a non-mind, blind impersonal force somehow created all of these fully formed creatures, all these species and kinds, a vast array, almost immediately, for no reason. They just kind of made themselves just like that. Or there is a mastermind, a divine creator behind the creation itself. I don't know about you, but I'm going to go with the latter. So that's the end of this video. I'd love to hear your comments on this topic. If you haven't already, please hit the notification bell and share the video, like the video, and comment on the video. And remember, faith is not fairy tales and God is real.